And tonight we have a couple of presenters. You all met Emily Woods last Tuesday, talked about equine, basic equine. She's going to be joining Master Gardener and Master Naturalist Beth Walker this evening, and they're going to be talking about flowers and landscape care. And I think they're going to be tuning in to some landscapes outside and showing us things that they have planted and just talk about some of the issues and opportunities you may run into. So Beth and Emily, take it away.
All right, Emily.
Okay, we don't have an image or anything.
Okay, I should be working. So Epsom salts are basically magnesium sulfate, and this was something I'd not really heard a whole lot about before until we brought it up, and I was talking to Beth about it earlier. But especially plants like tomatoes or peppers or bushes really use a lot of magnesium, so it's helpful for them to have magnesium in the soil.
We're getting a lot of feedback. I don't know if it's just because two computers are on. That may be.
That I'm not sure how to get mine to stop.
Let's see. Okay, is this better? And I might just use Beth's audio.
Yes. Yeah, that sounds good.
My phone doesn't have the best service, so that's probably part of the issue right there.
Okay.
I apologize for that.
Well, that's fine.
As I was saying, Epsom salt is basically just a magnesium additive. So you can also get it from dolomitic lime, but Epsom salt can be a little easier, especially if you just have a few plants. So there's a couple different ways that you can add it. You can mix it up 1 tablespoon per quart of water and then just spray it like you would a normal fertilizer. You could also mix it into just the top of your soil if you were going to do that. It's 10 pounds per acre, and you can just mix it in through your soil. And I was talking to Beth earlier, and she actually brought this up to where you can put it in a small ring around each plant. So if you have a tomato plant or something like that, you would just make a ring of it around the base of the tomato plant, and it would absorb it that way. So, but a lot of times magnesium shortage in your plant is going to cause the leaves to really start thinning, and they're going to start losing their color, starting at the bottom of the plant and then kind of working their way up. But you're going to see the leaves start losing color and then kind of thinning out. So I also read where you can put it on orchard trees. So after the leaves drop, you can put it on peach or apple trees if magnesium has been a problem in your soil in the past. So but it can be beneficial. It's not a all-around fertilizer, so it's really only going to help your plants if you have a magnesium shortage to begin with. If you don't, then it's not going to do a whole lot. But if that's something you have a problem with, and if you have like tomatoes or peppers, then it can definitely be beneficial for them.
Okay, was everybody able to hear that okay?
Yes, that came through good.
Okay, we're good. So the next topic that Emily found interesting was the poisonous plants to pets. And we were talking about this earlier, and once she started reading the list, she realized she has several in her home that are poisonous to cats, and she has cats. So I'll let her kind of go over a few of those, and you might want to check out and see what you've got and avoid a very large vet bill.
Yeah, so and what's interesting is I worked at a vet's office for a few years, and I definitely saw a lot of animals come in just because they've eaten things that they hadn't or shouldn't be eating. And houseplants was a big one. So I kind of knew that lilies are poison. So peace lilies and Easter lilies are both poisonous to cats and dogs. So there's something to really be careful of. I know at least my cat is super curious about the lilies, and she'll like kind of play with them and chew at them. But aloe vera plants are also really poisonous for cats and dogs. So that's not something we think about just because we think of them having beneficial uses for burns and stuff, at least for humans. But eating them it can cause a lot of stomach issues for pets. Asparagus ferns. So ferns are really hard because they kind of dangle down, and especially cats like to play with the stems as they kind of come over a pot. Asparagus ferns are poisonous. Boston ferns are okay, so they're not going to hurt them. But poinsettias are poison to most animals. Amaryllis are. So is a Dieffenbachia, or I've heard it called dumb cane. But Dieffenbachia plants as well as English ivy are also poisonous. So those are all really common. And I know, at least for me, I have an aloe plant, I have a peace lily, I have a poinsettia, I have an amaryllis. So it's just things, I keep my cat out of the room where my plants are. She likes to dig in them anyway. So I try to keep her out of it. But most of the time a lot of times they'll leave them alone. But if they get into them, it causes a lot of problems, and the vet bills run pretty high because it can do a lot of damage to their stomach and their intestines. So it's just things they're okay to have, but just make sure I would keep them out of reach of pets and not just count on the pets to not eat them. So.
Right. Okay, so now we're gonna take a quick look at one of the questions that Phil had given me was on succulents and sedums, they're in the cactus family, so they don't require a lot of water. They like a well-drained soil, and adding sand to a potting soil will give you a pretty good mix, or you can purchase a pre-mixed succulent or cactus mix. If you're planting outside, they will take the full sun. Some of the sedums do well in a partial shade environment, so that is an option. We're gonna take a walk over, I've got a little succulent bed made that's outside. How did you enter that room again, Emily? Okay. Don't know why. It's not giving me the option to turn my camera around now. Phil, I'm having trouble. I'm trying to get my camera to turn so that I can show you what we were talking about.
Let's see.
Oh, what it's. There we go. All right, here we go. There it goes. So can everybody see the plants that I've got?
Yes.
Okay. So this is just a little planter that I've made out of cinder blocks. It's got a mixture of garden soil and a little bit of potting soil and some sand. And this has been planted for 2 when you're doing hens and chicks is to make sure you check the zones on those, and they're actually a sempervivum and not an echeveria. Echeverias are not cold hardy. They'll do great in the summer here, but then come fall when it starts to frost, you're going to kill them. So I know a couple of years ago, the Black Prince variety of Echeveria was very popular. It's a gorgeous plant, has a real pretty flower, but the first frost kills it just completely dead. I lost a real pretty one that way. So these little guys here in this corner are all actually sempervivums. They're a hen and chick. So some of them, we call them a dinner plate variety because they get very large. Like this one back here, it's small now, but it will get as big as my hands both put together. So it gets really large. And then beside of it, these little guys, they're called green wheel. And that's as big as they'll get. So they look really good in a group planting. Let's see, this one here is called Oddity. It looks kind of like an octopus. It's really cool. It's got a bunch of babies coming up on the bottom. And the more sun it gets, the redder these will turn. So it'll be real pretty all summer long. And then here's our little strawberry planter full of different varieties. These plants here, the yellow and the pink, these are all different varieties of sedums. And then we've got, this is another sedum here. And then this one is called aspen. It hasn't bloomed out yet, but it's got a bluish tint to it. And they do attract some pollinators. We've got a bumblebee flying around with us. So does anybody have any questions on these? I can go over propagation of them as well. You all are ready for me to move on.
I have a question. I've had mixed success with succulents. Are there any that are more entry level, you think?
The hens and chicks, the more common varieties, are easier for I guess beginners with the succulent varieties. All the ones that I've shown you out here today are cold hardy. They will survive outside, so you don't have to worry about taking those in. So if you've looked, succulents, one thing that will kill them is overwatering. I try to make sure this planter outside gets watered once a week. So you water the soil, get it good and wet, and then let it drain. And then I don't normally water until it gets almost completely dry again. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So in propagating these guys, it's really super simple. Like these are all stone crops. If you just pinch a little piece off and lay that on the dirt or stick the end of that in the ground, you'll have a new plant. Let's see. I had a jelly bean variety that's really cute. That's just as easy to start. But and if anybody would like starts of this, if you know where my farm store is, feel free to come down and I'll give you pieces. I give pieces to just about everybody that comes by and says, "Oh, that's pretty," and I say, "Here, have some," because these are all super easy to start. As far as your hens and chicks go, this Oddity's got a bunch of babies on it. So all you would do is just pull one of these little pieces off, just like that, and plop it down in the dirt. And a couple of weeks, it'll have roots and be ready to go. Let's see. There's anything I'm missing. I mentioned that to make sure if you're planting outside that you actually have a sempervivum or sedums, that the echeverias don't do well in our hardiness zone. This is an echeveria that I had that got broken, and they're also super easy to propagate just by cutting. This piece fell off and it was laying in my gravel parking lot. But if you look really close, and I don't know if my phone will show that or not, but it has root hairs growing, and it really needs to be stuck in the dirt and watered, but they're really easy to start. This one has some, it's wet. There it is. But you can see how it's got some soil stuck to it already and got some little root hairs going. And then this is another one, and I forget the name of this one, but it's in the succulent family, but it's got root hairs as well. And this is just a piece that fell off and laid in the pot. So really simple to start those guys. Any questions on succulents before we move on?
For some reason, I can't hear very well. I don't know why. It's Kristen. But I was going to ask you how Monrovia does in the wintertime. Does it make it through the winter?
I'm not familiar with that one,
Okay.
but I can look that up if you want to send it to me in an email and get back to you on that. But we are in
Okay.
hardiness zone 6. So if we can look it up and find what hardiness zone is, that will give us an idea of whether or not it will make it here.
Okay, because I've kind of got a succulent garden going right now, but I can barely hear you all. I don't know why. Maybe it's just only me. But I'm going to mute myself again.
Okay. Are you all able to hear me better now? Did you turn your phone completely off?
I can,
Okay. So
I can hear you pretty
Emily
well.
lost the call on hers. Okay. So we're going to move on. This is a planning that I did just a couple.
I think you're froze up now.
I feel like the cell phone commercial. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. You froze there for a second.
Okay. So I'll just start over. I tell people when I go to look at their landscape, say, do what I tell you to do, not what you've seen me do in my personal landscape. I'm really bad to go and buy one of something to make sure I really like it instead of buying a group planting. So in a typical landscape, you would buy either a specimen plant or you would buy at least 3 to make a group planting of it. I think the only thing I bought to do a group planting of was bee balm this time. And I've got 2 different colors, but I did do a group of 3 of those. And this is a new bed that I can't really say it's new, I guess, because it was a bunch of tires that had different stuff in it, and I took the tires out. But there was a reason for doing tires. One was to recycle, and the other one was I liked a few plants that were invasive, but had a really pretty flower. And one of those that stands out in the background, it's got a bumblebee going crazy over it right now, is this yellow flag that comes from Europe. But it spreads really, really fast.
You froze again, I believe.
In the background, but it's not going to take over my bed. And then let's see, other things in the bed. I've got rhubarb just because, once again, I had one left over and I thought, well, I don't want to kill it, so I'll plant it. And then I've got a sedum in this bed as well, the Autumn Joy, which is one of the tall sedums. Let's see what else I've got. This is Veronica virginicum that I got from a fellow master gardener. It's getting ready to bloom. And pretty much everything that I put in this bed was for a pollinator type bed. I guess all except for the little guy right here in the back. This little guy here, that's actually a witch hazel, which think I got it from the power company when they were doing free stuff. So it's kind of what's going on in that flower bed. Has anybody got any questions about anything I've gone over? Because I kind of skipped around. You may want to try to get your call back because we're going to see how long my phone's going to last. Does anybody have questions about anything that's in this bed? Just going to try to flip over. If there's not any questions, we're going to move on to herb gardens while I've still got the battery on my phone. So, just a few tips on herb gardens. Besides the benefit to people of using them in cooking and teas and different things, they're also really good for pollinators. I've got some apple mint here that when it blooms, we've got a lot of butterflies and bees that like that one. Another one that people don't think about is catnip. This here is catnip, and it actually gets really tall and it can become a pest. It'll take over a bed. But the goldfinches really like the seeds off of the catnip. So once it starts to bloom and go to seed, I think I've counted 12 at one time last year on the group of catnip that I had here. But a problem with mint is any kind of mint is it can get invasive as well. One of the worst is peppermint. And I'll walk over here to my greenhouse and you'll have to excuse the mess. But I'll show you why I say peppermint can be a real pain. I did not plant it in here. And all of this green underneath my beds in my greenhouse is peppermint. And I have pulled it twice already this year and it just keeps coming back. So I'm stuck with it. But if anybody would like peppermint, I will be more than happy to share. We're going to go right over here back in the shade. And I'm going to flip the camera around and talk just a little bit more about herbs. If I can figure out how to do this. There we go. So a little bit more about herb gardens. If you are determined to do peppermint or catnip or spearmint or apple, I do suggest leaving it in a pot so that it doesn't take over your herb bed. As far as beginner herbs go, the easiest ones would be like catnip, thyme, oregano, cilantro, and sage, basil, chives, and dill. Those can all be started from seed relatively easy. If you're wanting to do things from cuttings, basil is easy to do from cuttings. Of course, peppermint. Rosemary, I was suggesting from a cutting. Division would be your bee balms are real easy to do from cuttings. Not cuttings, from division, sorry. And you would just take a small piece of the root ball and just split that off and you would do pine. Has anybody got any questions about herb gardens?
Hey, Beth, Jaquita had a question about moving gardens inside. She says, any tips for moving flower gardens inside successfully? Mine thrive outside, but seem to wane quickly indoors. Morning perhaps would help.
Okay, a lot of it depends on exactly what she's trying to move inside.
Well, she clarified and said herbs. She meant herb garden.
The herb gardens. So the best thing you could do for an herb garden would just be to take cuttings in early fall and go ahead and get those rooted. Now, a lot of your herbs will come back. Let's see, which ones of mine come back? All of my mints come back pretty easy. The catnip, it's really hard to kill, at least in my area. Chives will come back. Cilantro is not something that you can keep over. That's one that you would just need to reseed. The same goes for dill. Dill does reseed very easily. So wherever you had that planted the year before, if you'll watch, you'll have seedlings come back up. Let's see, thyme will come back. Thyme will last. We've had success with oregano coming back as well. Now, basil, I would take a cutting of it. And it doesn't have to be much, just a couple of inches, and then stick it in some soil and let it root, and then that way you'll have a good sized plant come spring. Does that help? Jaquita, did that answer your questions? Okay, I gotcha. All right. I'm going to move on to another question that we had. Let's see, one that we were going to talk about was flowers in your vegetable gardens. So I've got a garden that I'm going to do a strip of flowers in for a couple of reasons, and I'll tell you what I'm going to put in it and the reasons why. The main thing for me on the edge of my garden is I have some neighbors that I don't really want to be able to watch every move I make. So what I'm going to do is sunflowers, because they'll get pretty tall, they'll be thick, so they'll be able to give me some privacy and form a privacy fence. And at the same time, they're going to attract pollinators. You know, they'll be food for the birds, and they can also be used as a trellis for vining plants. So I may play around with that. Another thing I'm going to do is zinnias. Bees and butterflies love them, as well as hummingbirds. And I didn't realize that hummingbirds would be attracted to the zinnias. Zinnias can also be used as a trap crop. And what we mean when we say trap crop is it will attract the bad bugs away from your garden. So in hopes that they will leave your vegetable plants alone and go to the zinnias instead of your beans or things like that. And the Japanese beetles really like zinnias, so we're going to see how that works out. Also, marigolds are another good plant, flower for your vegetable garden. They deter rabbits and squash bugs. And the marigolds also exude a chemical through their root system that kills root nematodes, which I thought was pretty cool. I didn't realize that about the root nematodes. Another thing that I've got started to put out in my garden is nasturtiums. They're another trap crop. They attract aphids, and they also attract butterflies and other pollinators. And nasturtiums are edible. So you can use both the flowers and the leaves in salads. And they're also good if you have small animals like rabbits or guinea pigs or things like that in your house. You can use those as treats for your pets. Another plant that I'm going to put out is cosmos. Cosmos, they grow really quickly and bloom quite well. I've got a cat trying to help. Cosmos will attract green lacewings, and they will eat aphids, thrips, and scales. So the cosmos are pretty helpful in that. Oh, and lavender. I probably won't put lavender in my garden because it is a perennial. It will come back, but I may move my strip next year. So I don't want to really invest that time in the lavender only to plow it under for next year. I guess I could move it, but that's not something I'm getting ready to do. So the lavender will repel deer. It will also repel cabbage moths and ticks. So if you have raised bed gardens, then the lavender may be a good option for you to do some companion planting. Has anybody got questions about those? Okay, Phil, we were talking earlier about the garden that I have planted. I've got some eggplant out, and let me just read this real quick. I've got a problem with flea beetles now on my eggplant, and I've actually heard of people using eggplant as a trap crop for flea beetles to keep them off of your tomatoes and peppers and potatoes. So I don't know if I want to sacrifice my eggplant to see if it helps with the others, but has anybody tried that before, and do you know if it's a good option?
Well, I know I haven't tried it intentionally, but I know that the flea beetles will prefer the eggplants 10 to 1 over the potatoes and peppers and tomatoes.
Okay. When I was out there earlier, I didn't see any flea beetles on the tomatoes or the peppers. It was just the eggplant, and they were hitting it pretty hard. So I would say that's gonna, I don't know. I guess I may sacrifice one and then treat the others and see how it works. Does anyone have any other questions or comments?
Well, I have a question that kind of expands on what Jaquita was asking about the herbs. I know I'm not real good about bringing plants indoors that need to be brought indoors. Are there ones that just absolutely 100% landscape plants have to be brought in?
In your herb garden, your basil will not survive. The deal, I'm not even sure if you could bring it in and have it do well indoors until next spring. So you would probably be better off saving the seed on the deal and just replanting that one. And it grows pretty easy. But definitely your basils, I would take cuttings of those. And you could try even cutting it back almost to where it's just like 3 or 4 inches tall and bringing the whole plant inside. And you should, in a sunny window, as long as it doesn't get too cold, it should be okay. Is there any in particular that you're trying to keep alive, Phil, or is it just in general?
Well, it wasn't an herb exactly, but somebody gave us some dahlias last year and told us we had to dig them all up, and we did. We stored them in the garage, and this year I'm thinking I'm just gonna let them ride and see what happens. Cover them with some straw.
Okay, you might be able to heavily mulch those. I would use a hardwood mulch instead of straw and see if that works. But the dahlias may be a little, I'm thinking they would be a little too sensitive to the cold. They probably do need to be dug up.
Well, that's bad news, but thank you.
I'm sorry. Or you may, instead of putting those in the ground, that may be something that you put in pots. And that way you could just carry the entire pot into the basement and for storage instead of having to actually dig them up.
Okay, thank you.
Did anyone else have any questions? Let's see what that was really all that I had. Does anybody have any more questions for Emily before I let you guys go? Honestly, I don't do a lot with dahlias, so I'm not real sure. I would dig those. I would dig one up just to see if it has even started to sprout, or you may have had a mole or something eat those dahlia bulbs.
I'll say that the ones that we planted this year, it was all over the place. Some are up a couple of feet now, and some are just now popping out of the ground.
Okay.
There was a lot of variation in how quickly they sprung up.
Okay. Good deal. I may have to plant some of those just to see what my experience is with them for later. I didn't catch the message. What did she say? See? Oh, what is that? There is a natural deterrent for moles, and it is, they also call it gopher plant, but it's castor beans. And they are supposed to, if you plant castor beans, they will deter moles.
Well, Beth, that's not actually in my vegetable garden. They're around my house, like in my garden.
Okay, well, castor beans or gopher plants, we don't, I don't know of anybody that's actually planted. My grandmother always plants them in her flower bed. She'll just do one or two, but that does seem to help her in her bulb gardens to not have moles.
Okay, thank you very much.
And they're a very interesting looking plant. They're not a bean plant like you would think, like half runner beans. They really are an interesting plant to see.
Okay, so like a pastor that would be preaching. That's what you're saying. Pastor.
Yes, Shad, they are highly toxic. So be careful with those.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that.
Beth, we may have lost your feed again. I don't know if your battery went dead, but one thing that I wanted to thank you all for doing this, because this is the approach you took is something that Shad and Jeremy and I have talked about as far as going outside and looking at things using our phones and tablets and so forth to look at things. So now we know that that does work. So thank you all for being the pioneers on that. That's something that we hopefully will get to try down the road.
Okay. I'm going to shut mine off and we're going to move to Emily's phone so that we don't lose me.
Okay, so we
Okay.
should be.
There we are.
Yep.
So now you've got us both back on one phone and hopefully we won't get any interference from the two of them.
Okay.
Good deal. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and I'm sorry if it was a little bit crazy and sporadic, but this is my third Zoom meeting, so
Oh no,
hopefully
no,
well
thank you.
for everyone.
Did very well, and it was good to actually see the plants and instead of we got a little break from PowerPoints tonight, so thank you for that.
All right. Well, thanks, guys, and hopefully I'll get to join you on a Zoom meeting soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great stuff, ladies. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good job, guys
subject-
and gals.
All right.